Yeah. Hey everyone. So our project for the web final was a World Cup dashboard website that keeps track of all the games going on in the World Cup. It has scores for all of them. It has the date, it has the stadium, and it has both the home team and the away team. So to input scores, there are 3 types of users, and if you log in as an admin user, the input scores tab will show up at the top. And if you go into this page, it gives you a form for every game. So you can submit scores, you can submit tie scores, you can submit 0-0 scores, and they will all rewrite either the existing score in case you put in a wrong one, or it'll just rewrite the absent score. And if you hit submit when there's nothing, it will just remove the score. So this is in case you put in a score and it was accidental, that game actually didn't happen, or you put it in for the wrong teams, it can just remove that score. So this is connected to our database in the back end. So our database consists of matches, and every match has 2 teams and a stadium, and those are their own tables in the database as well. So all of these databases work together and use foreign keys and primary keys to interact with each other and have very accessible data. But the input scores page basically allows us to change the database without actually having to open the database files. So this is a lot easier to keep that like disconnect between the front end and the back end so that they can work without needing to depend on each other. And there's also a users table in the database that keeps track of all of the accounts that are made and all of the tables and the scores that users might have.
So on the schedule page, the leaderboard, the previous games, the next game, and the upcoming games in the World Cup are displayed. As you can see in each table, the date, the home team, the score only if it's a previous game, the away team, and the stadium is displayed. So the previous games table takes the matches list from the database and filters it so that the first 2 matches that come before the current date or the preset date are shown. Then the next game table filters the match data so that the first game in the match list is displayed in the table. Next, we have the upcoming games table, which filters the data so that the games displayed starts from the current date and on, excluding the closest date to the current date and time, which in other words excludes the date in the next game table. Lastly, there is a leaderboard table, which shows the usernames of each user in the site who makes a bracket and their associated score. This table filters based on descending order, which means that the users with the higher scores are at the top and the users with the lower scores are at the bottom. There's an additional refresh button, which included on the leaderboard table, which will be discussed in further detail later in the video. And so obviously these games have already happened since the date is set to November 27th. This shows how we are able to reset the date so that we can show the full functionality of the tables and the historical data on the matches. As far as the design of the page goes, each table was implemented using Bootstrap tables and cards with other small features that really bring everything together. And another key feature on this page is the clickable table rows, which lead to a detail page on the specific match.
When users want to know more about a specific match in a World Cup, they can always click on one of the rows and they'll bring you to this page where you can see the scores of this specific match. Like this match has been played, so it's gonna be a previous game. And over here you can see the scores of the different teams that have played. And as you can see, France won. So we had a feature such that we will have to bold the country and the scores that has won the match. And over here, since France won, France is bolded. And other than that, another really cool feature we had at the bottom of this page was the stadium and the picture of the stadium. The picture of the stadium is not in the database, but the name of the stadium is in the database. And basically how that happened was we named the pictures by the stadium names and we call image with the stadium names and we display it in this page. The other really cool feature that we have in this page is the weather forecast. What I did was I used a third-party API of using the longitude and latitude of the specific match, and I input it into the API such that it gave me the weather forecast for that specific match. And over here you can see the different temperatures and humidity and the wind speed of the match. This page was heavily used with Bootstrap and cards and different like styling from Bootstrap, and that's how this game page is made. Also, this page also has this really cool feature such that if games haven't been played yet, like this is an upcoming game, the scores will not be inputted yet. Rather than it will be a dash, and it won't show the scores and who won.
Yeah, so Emily talked about this a little bit earlier, but our website supports three kind of features or three kind of users, and I'm going to talk about that for a second. We have the unsigned in user, and this is just anybody who visits the page, and what they have access to is just the schedule. They can see the leaderboard, they can see all the users in the database, but they themselves can't make a bracket or input scores, obviously. They can see all the upcoming games, they can still click on games, all that functionality is still there. But we allow two other kinds of users as well. And you saw the admin user that Emily talked about where you could input scores, but there is a third type of user, and that's just a normal user who has an account. So I will sign up with a new account. And then once we make a new account, we can sign in. Oops. Also, we have the validation features on our form. And then we can sign in. And once we sign in, we now have access to creating a bracket and viewing that bracket. And so what that looks like is when you click on create a bracket, you see all of the games in the round of 16. Now, obviously, our schedule page shows matches that happened in the past that were in the group stage, but we updated the bracket to show the teams that were in the round of 16 so that it was actually a reflection of what was going on. So we can go through and we can pick a team for each of these. Obviously, we know who won these games, so I'm going to put them just to have a higher score. But regardless, we can pick a team for each of these. The rest of them don't really matter. But once you pick a team, the bracket allows you to have changes earlier in the bracket that are reflected throughout the entire bracket. So let's say I wanted Poland to win instead of France. When I change Poland at the start, it actually changes Poland throughout the entire bracket and shows that change. Now, when a user clicks save on a game, then they're redirected to the view brackets page. And just a quick little side note, when you go back to the creative bracket page, you're only allowed to make one. So you can't really cheat. And so once you make one, you're not allowed to make another. You can go back to the view brackets page. But what this does is this shows you which team won, bolded, and then green or red depending on whether your guess was correct. So you can see in this bracket, I got these two games right, but I messed up Poland, Senegal, and Japan. Got Brazil right, and it shows the current score of that user. And when I go back to the schedule page, it shows you which user you are in the database. So it puts that little me next to your name, and it shows you your score on the leaderboard table, which is refreshed by this, which is refreshed automatically and sorted to accurately reflect the changes that have been made. Now, another cool feature is that when an admin inputs scores, I'm not going to do an example because it's not necessary to show, but when an admin inputs scores into the database, that score change actually replicates throughout the database and recalculates the scores of all of the users. And so what that means is when an admin goes and changes a score of one of the games, everyone who has a bracket will have their bracket updated and also their score updated. And so this little refresh scores button uses Ajax to dynamically load content from the database. And so if the admin has updated the score, there's no need to refresh the page. We can click refresh scores. Now, obviously, when I click it, there's not too much that goes on it. It changes a little bit, but it doesn't actually change the order based off the points. And so this refresh button checks the database. It goes to an endpoint that we made that just returns a JSON of the scores and then resorts all the users in the database and is dynamically loading this content into the page. So there's no need to refresh the entire page. We can just click this button to use Ajax and dynamically load that content. But I think that's everything for our project, and thank you all for listening.